I'm just not going to spend my time on, people across the country celebrating the assassination and trying to expose them and get them fired. However, I will make an exception for public school teachers because that is a totally different beast. And this has been happening a lot since Charlie Kirk was killed. And it is not a surprise. We have so many radical teachers in this country. So it's not a surprise that they, not only on their personal social media pages, but in classrooms, all these stories coming out. I mean, there were a million stories over the weekend of teachers who, had been outed as making these disgusting posts about Charlie Kirk. And even in some instances, there was one crazy story about a teacher playing on repeat the video of Charlie Kirk being killed, which is, if you've seen it, is horrifying for an adult, let alone a child. But there was a story about a teacher playing it on repeat, just totally twisted, and essentially talking to their kids about how Charlie Kirk was a horrible human being. So this is the kind of doxing and accountability that I am all for, because these are people who you send your children to be with them for 8 hours a day. Do you want your kid to go be with an adult for 8 hours a day who celebrates a brutal assassination? No, of course not. And we had a ton of examples of this in Washington State. And the point of me starting the show with this is not to individually shame teachers, although we're going to do a little bit of that, but to make kind of a broader point about the indoctrination that we know is happening in schools and some of these really ideologically unhinged people who are around our kids and the fact that they get so much protection. So a couple of the more prominent stories that have happened, and we got a ton of tips from you guys over the weekend, of course. So at North Creek High School, which is in Bothell, Washington, if you're not familiar, it's south of Seattle, just a little ways. Very blue area. The principal there is a man named Eric McDowell, and he posted this on Instagram. Thoughts and prayers. Too bad gun control would have been far, far more effective. He'd still be alive. Maybe thoughts and prayers will work. Oops, nope. So talking about Charlie Kirk being shot and eventually dying. So parents, and I'll give it to parents, because this is a very blue area of the state. It is essentially a suburb of Seattle. They were livid. And they were emailing the school en masse over this. We got a ton of angry parents messaging us about this. And then we got word late yesterday that Eric McDowell is stepping away from his position as the high school principal there in North Creek. Now, he makes it sound temporary, although I'm sure this is just sort of an easy off-ramp for him. I'll read the statement he put out to parents. He said, "Dear staff and families, I'm sending you this because I know there are some questions related to my recent Instagram post, and I want to clear up any misunderstanding or miscommunication. Gee, please, will you do that? I have been against gun violence my whole life. One of my closest friends lost her brother to gun violence in a school shooting. I truly mean it when I say I condemn all political violence, including the cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk. My post, sent as a private citizen on my personal Instagram account from my home, was meant to decry the lack of any forward progress on ending gun violence in America. It was not meant to demean the murder of Mr. Kirk. I truly wish what happened to Charlie Kirk did not happen. He did not deserve to be shot or killed. I truly wish he was alive today. Violence is never the way to resolve disagreements or conflict. I was also not trying to be disrespectful to Christians or anyone of faith. My entire family is Christian. If we are to end political violence, we need thoughts and prayers and more. What we have been doing isn't enough as the violence keeps happening. I'm truly sorry that my post has upset so many. I definitely could have said things differently, and I apologize that the wording was not clear and led to so much misinterpretation." Yeah, that's what, it's our fault. Isn't that just typical? It's our fault. He said, "However, despite the fact that I had no intent whatsoever to inflame the current political environment, I own the impact that my post has had. I will be stepping away as principal of North Creek for the time being to reflect and ensure the focus of the high school is on our students." And then says that he'll be covered in his duties by the executive director of schools. North Creek High School is an incredible community, and our compassionate and kind students give me great hope for our collective future. I also want to note he's wearing a shirt in his picture that we can't read the entire thing, but it says, it's got a heart, and it says, "Make kindness something." I wouldn't be surprised if it said it's "Make kindness great again." So for someone who cares that much about kindness, clearly, and he says, he wasn't intending to demean what happened or mock Charlie Kirk. Clearly his post is demeaning it. Ooh, thoughts and prayers. Oops, I guess it didn't work. And then blaming it on us or parents for misinterpreting the nature of the post. And I also love how they always try to distance themselves as teachers by saying it was my personal Instagram. It was my personal social media. Yeah, but that's who you are as a person. And that's the problem. You're responsible, in this case, for a whole school full of other people's kids. And you say that you condemn gun violence or whatever it is, and yet you so callously disregarded what happened to Charlie Kirk. So the statement is absolute and utter nonsense. And then there were some issues with districts as a whole. And I think this fundamentally gets to the heart of my problem with our public education system right now. So the Kent, Washington School District, again, if you're not familiar, it's south of Seattle, a little less blue, but still blue. Some parents started noticing that, because of course it was September 11th, right? And the flags were already going to be at half staff. And then the order from the president and from the governor of Washington state was to continue the flags being at half staff through the day on Sunday, so through yesterday. And there were some parents noticing that at Kent schools, the flags were not at half staff. And so that was being pushed out on social media, and the Kent School District got so much blowback, it decided to put out a statement. And it just speaks to the problem with public schools. So they said, upholding our values, a statement on flag protocol and ethical leadership. Buckle up for this one. Kent School District is committed to upholding our core values of equity, excellence, and community. On September 11th, our flags were lowered to half staff in solemn remembrance of the lives and the courage shown on that day, a tradition we honor with deep respect. Different governmental entities have different policies regarding flag displays. Washington state law requires the district to display the United States flag during school hours except during inclement weather. The law does not require us to lower the flag to half staff in any particular instance, nor when another governmental entity may choose to do so. As educators and public servants, we believe symbolic acts such as lowering the flag should reflect the principles we work to instill in our students and community. When a person has made public statements that conflict with the values of inclusivity, respect, and student safety that we as a district strive to uphold, we may choose not to fly the flag at half staff. Our decision reflects both our compliance with Washington state law and our unwavering commitment to ethical leadership and educational equity. You have to be kidding me. So there's a couple things. The big takeaway from that is basically they're saying that if anyone dies ever who has said something antithetical to our values, we will not lower the flag at half staff for them. What if the president of the United States dies? And surely, if you're saying Charlie Kirk said things and did things that aren't in line with your values of equity and inclusion or whatever it is, surely you feel the same way about President Donald Trump, I guess. So are you really saying as a school district that basically if any conservative of note dies or is killed in any horrible fashion, that you're not going to lower the flags because it doesn't fit your values? And that's the other thing, and I think more fundamental and all-encompassing of this issue. They keep saying our core values. Lowering the flags for Charlie Kirk, it doesn't reflect our core values. Whose core values are those? Is the school district and the families that make it up a complete monolith? That would be really something. Are 100% of families and people in the Kent, Washington School District liberals? Do 100% of them hate Charlie Kirk and everything he stood for? Clearly not, right? Because that would be really something if we had a whole area where 100% of all the families and the taxpayers who fund the schools hated Charlie Kirk and hate conservatives. So here you have a school and obviously some sort of person in a position of authority for the school district, be it the superintendent or assistant superintendent, who've decided that their personal values are now our values as a district. And that's the problem. And that's the problem that we're seeing in public school districts across the state is they said their values as individuals who are working in a public school system whose salaries we pay. And now if you, even as a parent of someone who, pays to have your child go to that school, pays the property taxes, your values don't matter. They always want to talk about diversity, and it's in here too. Equity, excellence, community, diversity, our commitment. Diversity except if you're a conservative. Diversity of opinion except if you're a Christian. because that doesn't fit our values. Okay, so if the school district gets to operate off of their values and set them as they see fit, can anyone who doesn't agree with those values stop funding the school district? That seems fair to me. And it's wild because, like, the Kent mayor, I love the mayor of Kent. And she's a totally reasonable human being. We've had her on the show many times. And so the city of Kent is not completely left-wing lunatic. Yet the school district has decided that their values will not allow for them to follow an order from the president and from the governor of Washington state to keep the flag at half-staff for a measly 2 more days to recognize the pain that so many Americans are feeling after Charlie Kirk. And that's just indicative of what's wrong with our public school system as a whole. So shame on the Kent School District. It tells you a lot about our school system, about what needs to happen. And you've got these people and they're indoctrinating kids. And we wonder why kids can, as in the case of the assassin of Charlie Kirk, grow up in a conservative home with religion, a parent who's a member of law enforcement, and then in a matter of years after going off to college, become so radicalized that he assassinates someone. So schools really are the place where so much is going wrong in our country, for sure. And then there's this lack of any willingness to think critically. So a lot of the teachers who are, saying, oh, they don't care basically that Charlie Kirk was killed or even celebrating it, they're referencing comments that Charlie Kirk made about gun control. And I'll get to those in a moment. But for instance, there was an Ellensburg teacher, a kindergarten teacher, and that's really concerning. You've got someone who's around little kids who posted on her social media, I hope some of y'all just weren't really listening to Charlie Kirk carefully, because the alternative is that you actually agreed with the things he said, and that's a tough pill for me to swallow. And then went on this long extended rant about his views, allegedly, on guns and gun control. She said, I don't think anyone should die by being shot for any reason. I've screamed it from the rooftops at every single school shooting we've had in this country. My wall is filled with posts over the years, yet all these Kirk mourners in my feed are beside themselves with empathy for a man who incited this very tragedy to befall upon himself, but stay silent when children watch the same thing happen to their schoolmates over and over and over again at school in America. The very same day as Kirk and 2 weeks prior, but notice these same people had no courage. Christ-like? Seems like politically motivated, selective rage to me. You won't see me crying for the world being short one less person like Charlie freaking Kirk. Good riddance. Yeah, that's an kindergarten teacher in Ellensburg, Washington, which is like a sane area of the state. So a lot of parents upset about that one. So here's what I want to do. Because to me, I don't care if you didn't like Charlie Kirk. What do I care? I don't even care if you're not mourning over his death. There's a lot of people who've died in history who I haven't mourned over their death, either because I didn't know them or I didn't particularly like them. No one is saying that you have to be beside yourself with grief. No one is even really saying that you can't point out some of the things that Charlie Kirk said that you disagreed with. I mean, you do you. Be careful if you're a public school teacher, because that's taking things to another level. The only thing I want from people is to make those decisions and set your perspective on, other human beings based on facts. Just make sure that your opinions have the self-respect to make sure that your opinions are couched in reality and facts. And when it comes to Charlie Kirk's, these controversial statements he's made about guns, they are all way misinformed about what he actually said. And I don't think they've taken the time to actually do the research to understand the point that Charlie Kirk was making. And look, if you listen to the whole point that he was making unedited and you still hate it and disagree with it, by all means, but at least have the full context. So I want to give that to you today. It's going to be a little bit long, but I want to give it to you today. So this goes back to April of 2023, and Charlie Kirk was at an event and he was being interviewed on stage by a pastor, and then they were taking questions from the audience. So there's a short clip from an answer he gave about gun control that seems to be the basis for all of the hateful comments from these teachers all across the country celebrating his death. So here's the short clip that's going around and being shared by all these teachers and others on social media.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen.
Right.
You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home,
Yes.
by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. Sure.
So that's the sentence that a lot of these teachers are globbing onto to absolve themselves of their horrific celebration of someone's assassination is, I think it's worth it to have, a few gun deaths to be able to have the right to bear arms. And so they look at that as like, he's okay with kids being shot and killed at school, so he can have a gun, right? So here's what I'm going to do. It's like 3 or 4 minutes long, right, Nicole? But I don't see anyone on the internet putting this out. I see people putting it out as a full text of his answer. But there is audio that exists of his answer. So we went and found it and we pulled it. I'm going to play for you. And I'll post this on social media separately so you can share it when you see those instances of people taking him out of context, because his full answer was actually very compassionate, looking for ways to reduce gun deaths in schools, realistic ways to reduce gun violence nationwide, but comparing the issue of gun violence to other sorts of deaths that happen in America that we have as a society have deemed are essentially worth the price. So here is the question and Charlie Kirk's full response.
How's it going, Charlie? I'm Austin. I just had a question related to Second Amendment rights. We saw the shooting that happened recently, and a lot of people are upset. But I'm seeing people argue for the other side that they want to take our Second Amendment rights away. How do we convince them that it's important to have the right to defend ourselves and all that good stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. So I'm a big Second Amendment fan, but I think most politicians are cowards when it comes to defending why we have a Second Amendment. This is why I would not be a good politician, or maybe I would, I don't know, but because I actually speak my mind. The Second Amendment is not about hunting. I love hunting. The Second Amendment is not even about personal defense. That is important. The Second Amendment is there, God forbid, so that you can defend yourself against a tyrannical government.
Come on.
And if that talk scares you, wow, that's radical, Charlie. I don't know about that. Well, then you have not really read any of the literature of our founding fathers. Yep. Number 2, you've not read any 20th century history. You're just living in Narnia. By the way, if you were actually living in Narnia, you would be wiser than wherever you're living, because C.S. Lewis was really smart. So I don't know what alternative universe you're living in. Yep. You just don't want to face reality that governments tend to get tyrannical, and that if people need an ability to protect themselves and their communities and their families. Now, we must also be real. We must be honest with the population. Having an armed citizenry comes with a price. Wow. And that is part of liberty.
Wow.
Driving comes with a price. 50,000 people die on the road every year. Wow. That's a price. You get rid of driving, you'd have 50,000 less auto fatalities. But we have decided that the benefit of driving, speed, accessibility, mobility, having products, services, is worth the cost of 50,000 people dying on the road. Wow. So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. Wow. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe. So then how do you reduce? Very simple. People say, oh, Charlie, how do you stop school shootings? I don't know. How did we stop shootings at baseball games? Because we have armed guards outside of baseball games. That's why. How did we stop all the shootings at airports? We have armed guards outside of airports. How do we stop all the shootings at banks? We have armed guards outside of banks. How do we stop all the shootings at gun shows? Notice there's not a lot of mass shootings at gun shows. There's all these guns because everyone's armed. If our money and our sporting events and our airplanes have armed guards, why don't our children?
So that's the full unedited answer that Charlie Kirk gave in 2023 when asked about gun control. Much different, much more nuanced, much more empathetic and realistic than the little sentence that these teachers are using to excuse their hatred that says, oh, Charlie Kirk said, I think it's worth it if some kids die so I can own a gun. So, don't like Charlie Kirk, that's fine. Don't mourn his death, that's fine. Post that you didn't like his opinions on social media, that's fine. But at least do yourself the service of making sure that they're couched in reality, do an ounce of independent thought and verification. And they're not. And these are people who are supposed to be educating our children. And clearly they're not interested in educating our children to think for themselves. They want our children to think like they think. They want to indoctrinate them. And that's what's happening. That's what they're doing to themselves. They're being indoctrinated. They see something posted somewhere on another educator's or friend's social media page, and they just share it, and they don't care to really understand what Charlie Kirk said and the point he made. And to me, one of the most salient elements of that is his comparison with motor vehicle deaths. And I don't know the truth of his statistic that 50,000 people die a year in motor vehicle accidents, but I imagine that's probably true. And we know that people die, of course, in motor vehicle accidents, but we haven't decided to ban cars. We've decided that there is going to be a certain cost associated with being a mobile society. And for trade, for travel, for commerce, for all of these things, yeah, we've got to be out there on 4 wheels or more wheels to get things done, and people die, and that is what it is. And so, we're okay with that, but not the same sentiment when it comes to guns. So it's interesting, and people just don't care these days, I think, to think for themselves. So just, at least have some self-respect and want to couch your opinions in facts that you can back up. And these teachers don't seem eager to do that.